the just this gubernatorial debate. Really fun times. I personally strongly believe in the value of these debates, mainly because I think this is one of the few opportunities that folks get a chance to really see how candidates are going to stack up, and how they're going to go about doing something, how they deal with things when they're on their feet, when they're on it, basically on blast, by a news station. They have all eyes on them, and I think this is exactly the type of situation that shows us where folks are at in terms of their ability to lead or command a situation or take control of a narrative. It's my personally it's my personal belief that a debate is just a really key component. I know it doesn't always result in a actual change. It might not always move the needle. It kind of depends on who it is or what it is or where it is or what the context is. But I think there's a lot of importance in understanding that WMUR, where this debate is hosted, is the only private news station in the state like this. They're the only, aside from say a public access station, that's it. WMUR really has the whole thing kind of monopolized. And there is a piece on the Patreon, if for folks, if you want to get in there and check it out, about why local news is important. It talks a bit about kind of the history of WMUR and where they come from and who William Randolph Hearst was. So there's context there, but I think it's important to understand that, because even within this debate, there was a whole lot of incredibly conservative framing of certain questions, when it came to asking both candidates, frankly, about whether or not they had eaten out at a restaurant, whether they why they felt it was okay to attend BLM rallies, but it's not okay for racetracks to open up. It's like, really, it's a totally separate discussion to discuss the nature of why the questions that they ask are like lean conservative, and I think that's content for a different episode. But because I could burn probably an hour talking about this, and frankly I'm hungry and it's almost lunchtime for me, so I do want to just kind of like hop into some of the actual content here, because I think this is like mainly what I'm going to focus on are two parts of the debate, because I think that generally speaking, you find that there's a lot of time where they're agreeing with each other. And what I want to hone in on is some specific differences, and mainly it comes down to approach, and it comes down to responsibility. And I mean, I said at the top of this show that I think Andrew absolutely killed it, and I think what I'm going to do is we're going to take out some clips and we're going to talk about exactly why that's the case. So first up, I have this one's funny because it's from a lightning round, and it gets into a whole topic of discussion that I don't think they meant to get into, and the whole lightning round gets derailed, which is a riot. So this I'm gonna hit play on this, and we'll watch this, and I'll just sort of talk about it afterwards. So here we go. Oh. Oh well, folks, sorry. I just realized that I had an audio issue there that whole time. So here's what we're gonna do. I will bounce this back, and we're gonna redo this. Sorry about that technical issue, and sorry about all that dead space. Yeah. So let's restart this so that we can get into this. Here we go.
Or less. Okay, so the first one regarding judicial nominees. Should working on or for a political campaign disqualify a lawyer from serving on the bench here in New Hampshire? Councillor Volinsky first, please.
Should not disqualify the lawyer, but it's appropriate to ask what the platforms were. That's the problem with Gordon MacDonald's nomination. He twice worked for political parties that denied the right to reproductive freedom, and that's disqualifying.
Senator.
Well, Andrew lifts up his blocking of Gordon MacDonald as the alleged third anti-choice justice on the New Hampshire Supreme Court, 5-member court. Well, if that's the case, I guess the question for Andrew is, why did he vote for the first two?
I'm happy to answer that if I'm permitted.
Please.
They didn't have documented records of antagonism towards reproductive rights. And if you were so concerned about the first two, why didn't you say something during either of their nomination processes?
Senator, respond to that, please, and then we'll move on.
Well, because I'm not on the executive council, and I think the questions need to come from Andrew on the executive council, and he voted.
Okay, so this is really funny because Dan's just trying to turn this around, but Andrew's actually answered the question. He's fundamentally answered the question right here that they didn't have birth control rights issues, and he can't be discriminatory. So I'm gonna let this go again because this is really this is just priceless, folks.
For the first two, so I don't think we've heard an explanation about why he voted for them.
I thought they were qualified, and I don't disqualify candidates just because they're Republicans. I look at their documented record, and there was no documented record of antagonism towards reproductive rights, as there was with Gordon MacDonald. And if you think I missed something, you had the responsibility to point it out in time rather than to take shots during a debate.
Senator.
So that the face there, Volinsky. Volinsky's face is killing me right now. Okay, so this is the thing, man, is that Dan's really just trying to harp on Andrew for, why did you let these conservative judges in? And this is the problem because, okay, the reason I think debates are important, right, is because it gives us an opportunity to understand the political mindset of candidates. Now, what I would say, I think it's fairly safe to make this assertion about it, right? That Andrew is very focused on policy and Dan is very focused on party. If you throughout the debate, if you listen to the way Dan approaches things, he approaches things in a very system party oriented, from within the structure, going to deal with this process oriented stuff. Volinsky repeatedly just brings up policy points and things that need to be approached or dealt with or challenged, right? Now, that might have something to do with literally the difference between being a senator and being an executive counselor. One is definitely more about creation and generation and sort of the process. But if we, as opposed to the executive council position, which is a bit more critical. But if we step back for a second and we think about the interview that was just played with Tony, the reality is that the Senate is just a bunch of people proofreading legislation. You know what I mean? there's a certain amount of proposal, but frankly, this is a lot of people just sitting there getting to say yay or nay on stuff. And Volinsky's point is that in the entire nomination process, Feltes could have easily weighed in. So while Dan is attacking Andrew for allowing these conservative people to join the court, which, you know what, like, partisanship is not in of itself a simple reason to deny someone's appointment. And if we think about this, it's actually Volinsky basically did that exact thing when more or less when it came to a more recent education post that triggered an entire backlash response within the context of BLM, which was reasonable, and Andrew owned up to it. But the point is that the second you do that, right, you lose your progressive bona fides, because you're immediately just you're doing the same politicization that's pissing everybody off. So Dan's just perpetuating that within this context. There's no like self-reflection upon it, right? And Andrew is doing exactly the right thing by just taking it and turning it right around and saying, like, yeah, okay, look, like, I can't do that. These people didn't have any record of being against abortion rights or, reproductive rights, broadly speaking. Conservative though they may have been, I wasn't able to make that assertion based off of their history. So that's it. There's the fact of the matter. And his point is great. That if Dan really objected to this, he could have done it during the process. And where is he at? So Andrew puts that back on Dan. And I think what's so funny is that he doesn't actually have an answer for it right here. He just kind of slips right through it. We'll keep going.
Senator, please respond.
Well, look, I think it's clear. Andrew has campaigned on his blocking of Gordon MacDonald as the alleged third anti-choice justice of a 5-member court. And the first 2 he voted for. So he's basing much of his campaign on this. So I don't think he's answered the question about why he voted for the first 2.
So, I mean, like, he did, though. And this is why I say watch the debates. Because from a purely debate tactic right now, Feltes looks real bad. Like, that was a really, really foolish way to respond to that. Because he just doubled down on a take that he had earlier that got crushed. So, like, and maybe that's just, maybe he's not great at debating, but frankly, I don't want that. Right? As a voter, I don't want somebody who can't think on their feet enough to know that you shouldn't repeat that point after you've been slammed on it. Like, repeating a falsehood doesn't suddenly make it true. Okay? Volinsky answered that question outright. And Dan's just not, he's fundamentally not accepting it. And I think that might be something that I want folks on the left to really, really, like, think about that. Okay, think about that good and hard, because this is what they're gonna do, right? This is the way this is gonna happen, is that we have to deal with the center claiming progressive bona fides, which they state at the very opening of this. Now, I'm not saying Dan's not progressive at moments. He certainly is. He has his spots about it. But in comparison to Volinsky, it's just not really a contest at this moment in time. I don't see that being the case. And they're going to try and take that progressive mantle, and then they're going to make arguments like this. And part of the reason I'm doing this is because I want to have another voice out here that points out just how hard Andrew wrecked Dan on this. Folks need to understand just how bad that was. Like, It's really, really bad. So I'll roll on it a little bit more. I think I lost my place a little bit, so we might end up rewatching some of this. But I just want to kind of double back on it. Just watch it a little bit more, because this is really silly.
Of Gordon MacDonald as the alleged third anti-choice justice of a 5-member court. And the first 2 he voted for. So he's basing much of his campaign on this. So I don't think he's answered the question about why he voted for the first 2.
The first 2 were not anti-choice.
Okay.
Actually, the first one was a woman who supports reproductive rights. And I have not said Gordon was the third.
Okay.
I said he was the Chief Justice.
Gentlemen, thank you. We're going to move on now to the next question in our lightning round. Senator Feltus, let's direct this one to you first.
So, I mean, look, it's just, and that ends, right? That just ends right there. Andrew gets the last word. And, I mean, look at Dan's face. Look at his, like, that was an attack that really just fell flat. Like, that was a super, super flat fall, and it honestly, like, it was an attack on Andrew, and the only thing that it really did was make Dan look like he doesn't know how to handle himself in a debate. That he's and what I think is so funny is that he constantly talks about how, you know, oh well, our campaign isn't trying to tear people down. I mean, like, you're in a debate, dude, and you're literally doing that exact thing. Like, I'm sorry. A race is about beating your opponent. It's what it is. Like, you're going to have to make attacks in the process of proving that you're better on an issue than somebody else. And what Dan does throughout this entire debate is repeatedly attack Andrew and then say, well, we're not about trying to tear people down. But what is he trying to do here? He's trying to tear down Andrew's record as a prosecutor. He's constantly trying to make this comparison. So it's kind of like, it's again, a little bit more of this speaking out of both sides of the mouth thing, which is a super hallmark of New Hampshire centrists, not New Hampshire progressives. Or it is if you misidentify what progressive means in this context. And I think we have a fraught experience with that word in this state. I think it's a challenge for us sometimes. I think people don't necessarily have a very rigid idea of what progressive means. So everybody's in a different place on it. I think it's a challenging word sometimes. I think it's a little nebulous. I am fine with nebulousness. I think that's okay. But I think it means that we need to be more careful about how we delineate what that spectrum itself looks like. So, right. Okay. I want to move on to the, tax portion of this, because I think this is the other part that I really like. I enjoyed quite a bit. Again, I got to stop saying like so much. This is the worst, folks. I am so sorry. One of these days I'll get better. I promise. One of these days. Until then, let's check out this clip.
You have said, of course, that you do not support a broad-based income or sales tax. Councilor Volinsky, you've, of course, not made that pledge prominently, and you said you might be open to such a tax, either one or both, or we're not sure. So let's direct this question to you. What specifically, now that's a week before the primary, will you propose to relieve the property tax burden on those who need it the most?
So the premise of your question is that we can live with the property tax. We can't. It's got a crushing burden. It's immoral. It forces seniors to ration their medication so that they can pay their taxes to stay in their homes. It keeps us from building affordable housing that young people and working people need. It hurts us in developing small businesses that also create jobs, because in broad swaths of our state, we cannot open businesses because of the tax burden. The property tax is New Hampshire's broadest based tax. It's unfair and it's immoral. So I would say this. About a week ago, experts before the School Funding Commission said two things. One, we spend about the right amount of money, $3.2 billion, and two, we can solve the school funding problem constitutionally without an income or sales tax, relying on a fair statewide property tax.
Okay, hold on. I am gonna jump in here for a moment because I want to kind of make a distinction on this before we jump in, right? So Volinsky is actually saying two different things right here. And I think it goes a little over Dan's head. So on the one hand, Andrew is saying that the property tax in of itself is not fair, and it's not equitable, and it stands in our way, which is just true. Like, that's just a true statement. It's a regressive tax. It's based off of a time when the amount of land you own directly related to how much money you make. There was a straight up correlation that was reliable. We don't live in that time anymore. Not everybody is a farmer. The world changed. Sorry. So, in that sense, from that perspective, Volinsky's absolutely right. The property tax is horrible. And what he then goes on to explain is that there's a new data that has come out that has been, it essentially, and I will see if I can get it pulled up here while I'm talking about it. But in many ways, okay, so what this new data set is, essentially we can do what we can cover what we need to cover with money we raise, right? Which is okay. It's possible to do it. What it requires is a certain redistribution, effective redistribution of the burden itself, right? So the idea is that, each town makes up a certain percentage of its education budget, depending on how much revenue they raise off of their taxes. It kicks in and it is compensated by the state when the town is more poor, right? It's possible to do it if there's a certain amount of kick up, or there is a way feasibly, at least according to this data, to do that. And Volinsky is citing that and basically citing, yeah, look, like if you rejigger it a bit the way, what we have, it's entirely possible to make this work. And so in this instance, that's not an argument necessarily for a property tax, but just simply an argument that there's steps of gradation within this broader discussion, and not taking the pledge just doesn't put a cap on it. You know what I mean? At the same time, he's still offering a way to work within the framework that Feltus is kind of insisting upon, but then gets criticized for it. So I'm just gonna hop back to this clip. We're gonna watch this some more.
And, Senator Feltus, you've said you would close tax loopholes to try to relieve the property tax burden. Can you go into detail about that? Which ones you would close and how much that would raise to relieve property taxes?
Sure. Thank you, John. In New Hampshire, roughly 50% of businesses and corporations that are based in New Hampshire or sell into New Hampshire a product or service pay even a cent in our corporate tax code. In the last budget, securing over $200 million in new support for our communities, including securing $140 million in new public school education funding, the biggest public school education budget in state history, finally doing full-day kindergarten, the biggest increase in 20 years. We closed loopholes for corporations in the system, including corporations like Netflix, who clearly had a business relationship with the state of New Hampshire, selling a product or service into the state of New Hampshire. There are a lot more of those loopholes to close. And I don't support a broad-based income tax. Last night at a forum, Andrew said he would sign a budget with a broad-based income tax in it. And I disagree with Andrew. I don't think we spend the right amount on schools. I think the state should step up and spend more on our schools.
I think the question was, how much in the loopholes would you develop?
I think well, Andrew, a lot more than you're shuffling around property taxes.
Actually,
Oh no. Oh gosh, hold on. I gotta pull that back and watch it again a little bit, because that was just like so priceless, man. Oh no. Okay. Hold on. We're gonna pull it back. We're gonna do like go back maybe 30 seconds. Just I gotta get this again.
And I don't support a broad-based income tax. Last night at a forum, Andrew said he would sign a budget with a broad-based income tax in it. And I disagree with Andrew. I don't think we spend the right amount on schools. I think the state should step up and spend more on our schools.
I think the question was, how much in the loopholes would you develop?
So like, okay. This is hilarious because Dan just never answers the question. Literally, just never answers his question. And instead decides to try and attack Andrew for saying that it's enough, right? Now, what Andrew said is that this study says that there is enough he said they say that it's about right, okay? Not the same thing as Andrew saying it's about right. Andrew might want more funding. He probably does. I'm sure he does, okay? I'm really sorry. This is good stuff. So there's a weird like tie being made that's just simply not true that Dan's trying to do, while simultaneously he's not answering his own question. So again, bad debate tactics, right? You're starting to get into dodging and trying to use a false equivalency logical fallacy to destroy your opponent's position, when effectively you're just opening yourself up to more attacks. So we'll get to Volinsky's sort of like what now moment right here.
I think well, Andrew, a lot more than you're shuffling around property taxes.
Actually, it deals with the problem as the experts indicated last week. So how much will you develop for the budget for schools with closing your loopholes, and why haven't you closed them till now?
Okay, so really quick, this right here is the piece that they're talking about, right? This is the information. It's pretty detailed, and I'm not necessarily going to take the time to explain the whole thing on today's stream, but I will make sure that there's a link in the description so that folks can read this, because this is important. Okay, this is very important. So basically, it consists of two components. A mandatory minimum contribution would be required of every municipality in the form of local property tax. Local contribution would be supplemented by statewide property tax, the proceeds of which would be distributed among school districts using the weighted formula. So let's see here. Yeah, so I do believe they give you, okay, so I'll get down to the example here. So in Claremont, funding would total $33.9 million or $22,222 per student, of which the local state shares would be $3.6 million and $30.3 million respectively. Funding in Durham would amount to $12.8 million or $13,737 per student, $6.1 million raised locally, $6.7 million from the state, and in Wolfboro, funding of $9,166,439 or $12,892 per student would consist entirely of the local contribution of $11,198,189. So this is what it's talking about. Like, if you're when Dan says we're going to raise taxes, what he's talking about is we're going to fairly tax super wealthy towns to pay for their students, so that they don't absorb state funding that really desperate towns absolutely need in order to be able to provide an adequate education, which is the fucking language that the state used. Come on. Like, so this is the thing. Feltus is arguing against fairness right here. When you make the argument, and he actually had a campaign aide do precisely that on Twitter, argue against fairness. We're literally going to argue against saying, hey, wealthy people need to pay their fair share. It is not chill for the poorest of us to get taxed off our asses to be funding out through state dollars a wealthy community's school program. The idea should go in reverse. You make the people at the top pay for what they need to pay for. And what's cool about this right here is that essentially the proposal is saying that it's not even about anything more than be responsible for your own yard, right? Like, if Wolfboro earns enough to pay for their students, they should, they don't need state funding. They can cover it. That's cool. Help a town that needs it. So anyways, I just really, to get back to this sort of like nonsense, that's really what you're dealing with in this situation. So I just kind of want to give that caveat, and we'll get back to it right now, okay?
We did close them. We dedicated over $200 million. Hey, by the way, it's one thing to litigate an ed funding case. It's another thing to deliver ed funding. That's what we did. We developed the most progressive budget in state history, and we got to build off of it. Andrew, your idea is to raise property taxes in some communities and then redistribute it. It sounds like that's your idea. I think the state should step up and support public school education. You know, this is about Iris and Josie's future. It's about all our kids' future. They deserve a foundation for success and opportunity that's as strong as the granite under our soil. We're going to build off that progressive budget that Democrats did and move forward.
Well, I'll just say that most progressive budget leaves us 50th in the nation in state support for public education.
Okay, he's right. Volinsky's very right there. This is a huge issue that I want, like, this is for the left, right? For the left, this is where you attack the center. You attack them on the fact that everything, it's all historicized to them, right? Like, it's all within this historical context of, well, this is the most progressive budget in state history. Okay, yeah, how progressive is that? We cannot pretend that we exist in our own historical vacuum. It's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. We in New Hampshire like to pretend that there's no other, like nobody else has done anything that's better than what we did. when in reality, we're stuck in the 1700s, legislatively speaking. And we use asinine arguments like most progressive budget in history to justify incremental change that doesn't do jack for people that are really, really struggling, that need to actually see a fundamental shift in the way in which things are funded for them in their communities, so that they're not struggling so hard all the time. And this is just like, you want to talk about politics as usual. This is the politics as usual. And I think that comes up in a minute. But like, it really is just, this is preposterous. Okay. We got to examine the absurdist framing that Democrats put forward. I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of it. I really appreciate that Andrew just calls it out. A lot of people seem to not like. I have heard repeatedly that he's made enemies over this. And frankly, you know what? Anybody that's feeling salty about it, I would say that maybe thicken your skin up a little bit. And stop being so concerned about what people think you. You know what I mean? Like, I'll get canceled for this show or whatever I say. Like, people don't even understand it. Like, you put yourself out here and you say something that really matters to folks, and most of the time it gets twisted around a lot. And that's what's happening right there. And to really take that hard position requires accepting the fact that people are going to misinterpret you all the time. And the most important thing to do is do exactly what Andrew is doing right here. This is like, in my opinion, he's leading by example and just not taking it and just not sitting on it and not letting the moderator cut it off, or just, like, it's important to push back on this absurd framing because we gotta change the way, like people's sort of political vocabulary, I guess. And maybe not necessarily just change the vocabulary, but change the way that people understand what each term means. So sort of like bolstering the understanding of the vocabulary. So, and we'll get into, I'll play it again, but, we get into the concept of politics as usual, and I think we'll discuss that a little bit.
It was an improvement, but it's mostly one-time money, and it came after multiple years of cuts. So really, you were giving back money that the school district should have gotten in prior years while you were in the Senate, Dan.
That's not true, Andrew. And I know you've never worked on a state budget, but this is the biggest public school budget in state history, the biggest increase in 20 years. And you know what? For Andrew to say, look, we're 50th after this budget, and then say we spend the right amount on schools, doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. We hear.
So right there it is. You just watched it happen. Okay? Dan says that's not true when Andrew points out that funding has repeatedly been cut. So every single time you cut something, right, basically now we are clamoring to get back what we lost. And Dan's like, no, that's not how it works. Well, okay, you're the one who cares about the history of everything, right? Like the how historically progressive this budget is. You care so much about the history of the politics in the state. Well, where's the consciousness for the history of austerity and loss of tax dollars? And if Dan seriously, like, that should concern us about Dan as a senator in his mindset, right? Does he seriously not think that he's fighting to get back funding? Or does he genuinely think he's out here pioneering new funding that's never existed before? Like, what the hell? What the hell is that? That baffles me. That is so confounding to me. that he would not accept that frame. Like, to me, that seems like a pretty basic frame understanding for most people on the left, even to the center, that we are in a process of reclaiming funding that we should have had dating back to Claremont, right? Like, this is absurd. This is absurd that he does that, and then turns around and accuses Andrew of not having made a budget before, right? Like all of a sudden what do we disqualify somebody's eligibility to run for governor's office because they weren't elected to the Senate or the House first? Do you have to have that prerequisite credential in order to actually hold the governor's office? Because it sounds like Dan's kind of trying to just purity test Andrew right here, which is and it's an establishment purity test, which is even worse. It's like career politician purity testing. It's gross. It's gross. And he's still not answering the question about the loopholes. Still not answering it.
A lot from Andrew about the pledge this, the pledge that. We don't hear any plans. And let's be clear, talking about the pledge without talking about your plans is just politics as usual.
Well, the pledge is politics as usual. I'm happy to explain the problem with school funding, but let's allow the next question. All
right. So, yeah, I mean, there it is. There's, I just, like, I hope we are all watching the same thing right now. Like, if I'm off base, I would love somebody to explain to me how I'm off base. But you know what? This is just that's madness. That is absolute madness, in my opinion. So I'll try and jump a little more to the end here and see just, what we've got in our final stretch here. I think, this last bit I think is really worth doing. So I'm going to go for it.
And before the candidates will make their closing statements. We're living in a time when people are anxious. They're worried about their health, their children, their jobs, the political climate, and a whole lot more. So how are you the person who will help lead Granite Staters through these times? We begin with Senator Feltes on that.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. You ought to be able to trust that someone's going to be in your corner. Working people and working families ought to have someone in their corner in the corner office. That's who I fought for my entire career. When I was fighting for that coverage for folks with diabetes to make sure the price cap is only $30 out of pocket. When I was fighting as a legal aid lawyer for access to health care. Andrew was representing Craig Benson and Craig Benson's corporation dismissing someone with diabetes. When I was fighting to protect homeowners, including Carl and Pauline, who got the home of their dreams, a modest home, and then fell behind during the Great Recession with job loss. When I was representing them and helping them save their home against a Wall Street bank, Andrew was on the other side in the Great Recession, representing a title company that was alleged to defraud people out of their homes. So fundamentally, this is about who you trust. I've always been on the side of working people and working families, and we need to get out of this mess in a way that works for them,
Senator,
not corporate special
Senator,
interests.
thank you. Councilor Volinsky, your response to the final question?
Yeah, I think we need to rely on people who will tell the truth no matter whether it's helpful or painful for them. Those comments about the title insurance company was disciplined by the Department of Insurance for giving discounts to fellow business members of the Portsmouth Country Club. It had nothing to do with mortgages. That's just a bald-faced misstatement. Look, you need people who you can trust, who show good judgment. On Granite Bridge, I opposed the Granite Bridge fracked gas pipeline, and I stayed opposed to it. I haven't switched sides on that issue back and forth, back and forth. On campaign finance, I said I wouldn't take PAC money and I wouldn't take LLC money, and I've never had to return money because I didn't live up to my own standards as Dan has. It's judgment, it's honesty, it's candor.
Counselor?
That's who you trust.
Counselor, thank you.
Look, I want to show this segment, I wanted to show this little piece because I think it is, it's important to acknowledge, look, like, you're never going to get a perfect candidate, right? You're never going to get exactly every single thing that you want. Okay. And realistically, we can be not necessarily happy about certain aspects of Andrew's work history. But I really want to put this out there to y'all folks for a second, okay? We all have to exist in this capitalist society that makes us do so many horrible things to each other. Because we have to make a paycheck, we have to get our rent covered, we have to keep our lights on, we have to buy food, we have to do all this stuff. And we've commodified everything in our society. That's just what Americans decided to do. It's what we hold up. And every single person has had to, in some capacity, participate in some sort of unethical process. That could be as low level as your boss instructed you to not recycle at work. Or it could be working for a private law firm. And you are taking clients that you take, and you are defending clients that you defend. And if you're not a partner at that law firm, you don't necessarily have full say over what goes on. Now, is there reason to question or interrogate, aspects of this? Yeah, sure. Okay. But this kind of goes back to purity testing, right? And I think it is a really, really, really stupid and slippery slope for us to get on when it comes to litigating work history of people and using that as the sole measure of their contribution when there's other aspects of that person's life that need to be given equal weight and historicized within that own person's life and experiences and inputs. Okay, so look, when it comes to Claremont, it's really difficult to say that, that Andrew Volinsky hasn't been integral in dramatically shaping the conversation around education funding and property taxes in this state, which is probably one of the, if not the most hot button issue next to, say, like addiction, like the addiction crisis, right? Like this is huge. And this is, again, historical, right? Because Claremont is old now. It's really old. We're talking about the 90s. It's like 30 years ago. And it's like, which case, right? Which case do we inspect? Do we inspect the time that he worked for Craig Benson? One-term governor who did miserably and is kind of a joke to a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of people that still love Craig Benson, I guess, but like, it's kind of, that was a different time and a different situation against a different candidate. And there's a lot to be said for whether or not Fernald was a good candidate in that governor's race. But, attacking Volinsky's bona fides just seems like not, not a good tactic. Attacking Volinsky's progressive bona fides just doesn't seem like a good call. Casual reminder that this coming Monday on Labor Day, which, I really like, Volinsky is meeting with, this is a special event that RAD is hosting with Bernie Sanders, the Labor candidate who has endorsed Andrew Volinsky. Now, I know that Bernie Sanders probably doesn't carry as much weight for a lot of people these days. I get it. I totally get it. But the fact of the matter is Sanders is still a really important part of this discussion. And he represents a very specific subset of the sort of democratic socialist view of reformation within the Democratic Party through revolutionary means, which I think is an interesting approach. Obviously, it's somewhat problematic, but, it's definitely important to consider that even despite Sanders' loss, right, which is a huge drag, no joke, very, very not pleased about it, but it's really worth noting that Volinsky outraised Feltus last quarter. More grassroots volunteers. He's not taking any PAC money. I had my own certain skepticisms about whether or not Volinsky would be able to really take the nomination this time around. And I gotta say, looking at that data, right, I don't like that. Just those hard numbers. I mean, I'm not necessarily looking at polling. I'm looking at just like if I'm, from a resources and pure positioning standpoint, based off of the contents of that debate, Andrew's looking a lot stronger. So, progressive folks, rally behind this. Tuesday is coming. It is coming. It is less than a week away now. So, just, I don't know, food for thought. I definitely want to hear from folks on this whole take. So hop into the comments on this video. Let me know what you think down there. Reply to it on Twitter. Comment on Facebook. Do the whole kit and caboodle, because I'm going to use all these dumb Yankee catchphrases. Seriously though, I actually want to, I talked about the vulnerability of being out here and doing progressive content. And I guess, it's like, here's the sort of plug segment of the show, because we're wrapping it up now.